at this point. He's been a member of the church and a founding member, so he's been here well over 30 years. He's been a great mentor, a great friend, and I'm proud to welcome him to the platform to talk about what it's like to be a member of the church.
Good morning, everyone. It's very nice to be here this morning and help all of you. And I have been asked to do the history of the church, beginnings of the church. And hopefully that's what we'll accomplish today. So, in the beginning, the Center of Enlightenment was started one evening in 1981 at a convention of the National Spiritual Associations of Churches in Jackson, Michigan. It was during this convention there were a group of some group that met in one of the rooms for a seance. And it was a thought then, and it was discussed before the seance began, about starting our own church. Well, during the seance, we asked for a sign that this was the right thing to do. And it wasn't about a minute or so later, the door in the motel room at that time, became filled with ectoplasm, grayish blue-green substance that everyone could see. And the door itself began to thump. You could see it moving. Thump, thump, thump. It was like a heartbeat. So everyone knew at that point it was the right thing to do, to begin the center. So the time had come, and a group of 13 of us left the church that we were at. And it was due to some disagreements. And when we left to start our own church, we agreed that and come up with the name of the church for the Church of Enlightenment for Spiritualist Pursuits, which at the time we thought was a really good name, only to find out later it wasn't. We'll get into that. The names I recall are as follows. Reverend Betty Jopek, she was the backbone of us getting started. Her husband, Ed Jopek. Myself, Bob Wilson and his wife, Sandy Wilson. Betty Ruth Tibbetts, Ted Spirioso and his wife, Sylvia. And Harold Milburn. And I do not remember the other four. I know there were four more and I can't remember who they were. But there were four of us at the time that took our training together through what was called the SAC, or the Spiritual Advisory Council. They were operating out of Florida at the time. At the completion of our training, we traveled to Chicago to a convention held at the Bismarck Hotel, where we were ordained. There were, of course, yearly dues and tithes. We had to send to them. And it wasn't long, it became apparent that what we were getting from them for the dues and the tithes were absolutely nothing. So we decided to go it alone and withdrew from that organization, began our own training program and our own ordination program, which has improved over the years, great deal of improvement, and is really in line now. We first met in a one-room storefront, very small and very crowded. We had room for only one aisle up the right side of the building. The rest were chairs. Financial support was rough, to say the least, but we had faith. After about 6 months of this, our first senior minister, Reverend Betty Jopek, who had a business of her own, bought a building on Rochester Road in Royal Oak. And we were there for about a year, renting from Betty before we purchased the church. In 1983, we became painfully aware that the name of the church was not right. We had become known as the ESP Church, Enlightenment of Spiritual Pursuits, the ESP Church. It was not cool back then. It had a negative connotation. So we had decided to change the name. To do that, we were required to shut down the church and to reincorporate under the new name, the Center of Enlightenment. Now, I was the first treasurer of the church and applied for the tax-exempt status. It was 3 years and a little less hair later that we were granted the exemption, and we went forward from there, not looking back. Okay? When we first began the journey, there were many obstacles to deal with. The first was our own faith. We wanted to have a new place from where we were at because the building, again, was not big enough. But we didn't have much money to deal with, only a few $1,000s, and there was much to look at. Many would say we need to find a place before we sell ours, so we had a place to hold our services. We could buy on a contingency that we sold ours. That in itself became another obstacle. We were told others are not going to deal with waiting for us to sell. But the fear of letting go and trusting God was still very real to us. Then there were many that came along, like Vito and Debbie Marchese and Frank and Nancy Volker, and said again and again, we can do this. And in a few months, they were convinced, most of us, yes, we can. And so we put our building on the market. And many times after that, we got offers that just did not give us what we thought we needed to buy another church. Time and time again, all of the deals fell through. And we held each other up, as any good community should. Then when the building sold, we had to be out. Where to go became our concern. We didn't have enough money to buy something else. The payment would be too high, and renting would eat up all the money we had to buy another building. It was then that God had sent another angel who whispered to us, have faith. And one of our parishioners, Vito and Debbie Marchese, had an office building that we could use, their space, rent-free, until we could find another place. Quite a godsend indeed. So off we went to Chrysler Drive in Ryan. There we held services for over a year and a half, each month getting a little closer to our goal. Our money situation still wasn't what it needed to be. So out of desperation, we started on a journey that would really test our faith. No one knew at the time just how much. It was the beginning of a long period. We began running a bingo just to get started, buying the equipment, and it had to be brand new. According to the state, you could not buy any used equipment or rent any equipment. That was well over $2,000. And for us at that time, that was a great deal of money. Yet we knew we had to do something. So over the course of the next year and a half, the bingo would become that double-edged sword, both a blessing and a curse. For there were many who decided that a bingo was not a good idea for a church. It was gambling. And others would say, well, all churches do it. All churches run a bingo. Well, that was quite a debate back and forth there. But we decided we had to go ahead and do something. And then as we were doing it, people got on each other's nerves, of course, and we began bickering back and forth amongst ourselves. There were many reasons, but in the end, bingo would divide our ranks. What it boiled down to is we had lost sight of the big picture and was concentrating more on the little things that really didn't matter that much. Now, if you listen to us, a church people bickering, what kind of a church is that? Well, let me assure you, we are a very normal church. Let me back up a little bit to the first church. The Apostle Paul knew about such divisions. From a very careful reading of his letters, we discovered that Paul's major concern was unity within the church. When Paul entered Corinth, it was the first time the gospel was preached. It was the first time the gospel was preached there. And after winning some converts, Paul began a church which met in people's houses. Paul tried to teach the people everything he knew, for they didn't have a written gospel. They depended on Paul for all their information. Excuse me. While Paul was in Corinth, the church thrived. The time came for Paul to travel to another city and begin the process all over again. much like us. After Paul left, people began experiencing problems. The newly found church turned to Paul for help. Paul was very sensitive to people and the issues that threatened to divide them. Paul first tried to build the people up, complimenting them for what they were doing, then gently admonished them about quarreling and was causing division within the new church family. Often, what threatens the church is the seemingly small, insignificant things. Bickering within a church often centers on issues like what color to paint the fellowship hall, or how many parking spaces can be reserved, or what decorations are in the chapel. The word Paul uses is a quarrel. That suggests that these were simply differences of opinion or jealousy and are not major doctrinal schisms. They were not arguing about the nature of God, but about little things. Often the seemingly small disagreements threaten the very existence of the body of the church. And that's just what was also happening with us with the bingo. And many other things along the line. It was kind of hard to fit 37, 38 years into this, but we did best I could. So this is where we were many times in our transition period. But as we all know too well, God was in charge and works in strange ways. It seems every time I was shaken, someone would send just the right email to bring me hope again. Yes, more angels. All around us were surrounded with angels. After a year and a half of looking for another building, another home we could call our own, we were struck with yet another blow. Vic's building was sold. But not to panic. The new owner said we could stay there until we found another spot. Very generous and a godsend. After being there about 6 months, we began to be squeezed for room. They needed the space. We had to utilize very small space, and then after each service, we had to pile up the chairs after the service and put them partitions around the space to hide them. This went on for a time, a real pain, but we did what we had to do. Okay? Then came a time when we had to move all of our stuff out because the new owner was having an open house. We could move back in again after an open house, but had to be out within a couple of months after that. So rather than to do all of that moving, we had put everything into storage. Okay? By this time, we knew to some degree how bad it must have been for Moses and his people to wander the desert for so many years. We felt like nomads, little by little, losing people to the lack of a good facility. Faith was waning once again. Then, as God would have it, we were offered another place to go, Divine Dimensions Spiritualist Church. We could move there at a very reasonable monthly fee. We were delivered again, but not without consequences. Divine Dimensions was way over on the east side on 17 and Garfield, a long way from our base in Royal Oak, but still a place to worship as a group and retain our income while still looking. All this time, we were looking for another place. We looked at many places. Each time there was a problem. Too much for the building. We could not make that payment and still survive other expenses. All the way through, there were those who were losing hope and those who would hold them up when they did. And it was a back and forth cradling in each other's arms that kept us afloat. But it was not always the same people feeling hopeless. We all took our role. We all took on that role as well as role of booster. Together, with God as our strength, we conquered our fears one after another, step by step. The whole time, one realtor was with us through our whole struggle. His name was Kevin Messier. I was in his office putting in a final offer on another place when we received a call about this place here on Goodrich. I said to him when he got off the phone, "You didn't tell us about that place." Well, it had just been put on the market. I happened to be there at just the right time. So I drove by and looked at it. I had the committee look at it. This was it. Everything felt right to everyone. The long process of rebuilding began. There were many unforeseen problems. There were many beams in our building that had to be replaced. Birds' nests were up in the beams. Raccoons' nest. Raccoons had eaten halfway through the beams in the ceiling that supported the ceiling of the building. The floor in the basement, all this floor, was not supported properly. We had to call in an engineer to tell us where to prop it up and how to do it right. There were plumbing problems, which required ripping up the floor in the basement. The plumbing was so bad here, every time they turned on the water, and they were still holding church service here. Every time they turned on the water, it flooded the place, leaked everywhere. The plumbing was so bad. So that had to be done. So they were having church service without bathrooms, and we figured we couldn't do that. So, okay, so the whole building was done top to bottom, and here we are today. And that was quite a process, which I'm trying to spend too much time on. But it was quite a rebuilding process. There was promises that they're doing the building at $89,000, which we didn't have at the time. We had to raise, but we figured we can do it. So in building this thing, they didn't want to put on new drywall. They were going to patch all these big spots in the wall. Well, what are we paying for? I was really upset, you know. The bathroom that is out here in our corridor now was not there. That was a very small little broom closet. We had the entire wall moved this way in order to put in that bathroom. So there was a lot of rebuilding done in this church. Our faith in each other won out. And now here we are at the crossroads of rebuilding our congregation. In rebuilding, we must be aware spiritualism is in the new millennium. There are new conditions, new avenues of communication, and our evolving society all around us. It will continue to change regardless of our individual participation. As spiritualists, and even more so now, after the past few years, we recognize the law of change. As we had to change to grow, so the religion of spiritualism will change. It is inevitable. As Arthur Findlay once said in his book, The Rock of Truth, an individual or community of individuals, be they a nation, a political party, or a church, if they do not change with the times, are bound by immutable law to perish. And as spiritualists, we understand immutable law is God's laws, laws that cannot be changed or transgressed. As we begin again to grow, we want everyone to understand, just as Paul wanted the Corinthians to understand, that everyone had something positive to contribute to God's work. And in this church, we are going to offer the chance to contribute it. When Paul left Corinth, Apollos arrived and began teaching the people. Apollos is a very persuasive speaker. The Corinthians were impressed with his eloquent wisdom. They were so taken with Apollos that they began to lose their focus. They formed cliques, saying, "I belong to Apollos." Other groups formed, they said, "I belong to Paul." Others said, "I belong to Cephas." Problems arose as a result. Paul responded to the report by asking him, "Has Christ been divided?" Very important question. Has Christ been divided? Of course not. The people must realize that they were followers of God, not followers of Paul or Apollos or even Peter. They were no longer focusing on God, but on his messengers. Briefly, let me touch on Paul and Peter as leaders of the first church. Peter, the simple, uneducated fisherman who had hardly any knowledge of the theological debates of his time, and it responded to Jesus in a direct, impulsive way without much distance or criticism. And Paul, the well-educated disciple of Gamaliel, a Pharisee, sharp, intelligent, deeply concerned about the truth and willing to persecute those who considered to be in grave error. It is to be remembered that the church is built on the foundation laid by both Peter and Paul. There are not two churches, one for simple people who trust their emotions more than their brains, and the other for intellectuals who are willing to debate the current issues. There is only one church in which Peter and Paul each has its own role and of importance. Everyone has something different and something positive to contribute to the church's life. And that's what we are attempting to keep here at the Center of Enlightenment. Everyone has something to contribute. Together we, in the church, will accomplish great things. Divided, the church will not accomplish much of anything. And so we are here at that point, 33 years later. It's been probably 38, 39 years now that I've been the minister. Anyway, and this is again a time of change. For I had found myself in the last 2 or 3 years gotten very tired. I found myself not able to keep up anymore, physical or mentally. So I decided it was time to step down as your senior minister and make way for the new. And at that point, I wanted to thank each and everyone here today. From the bottom of my heart, you've been an inspiration for me with all your love and support over the years. And I would ask you to support your new senior minister with the same love and respect you have given me over the years. And our new senior minister right now happens to be Rev Ken Nowaczewski. In between times, there was a new senior minister that came from outside of our church, actually. It was Rev Karen Woodmansey. And then she developed cancer and passed away. While she was the senior minister, she appointed Reverend Kathleen Katona as her assistant senior minister. When she passed away, then Kathleen became the senior minister. She didn't think she could handle the job herself, so she had me come back as a senior minister, and Reverend Barbara. We were a team of the senior ministers. Now both of them are gone, and still I remain. Why? Who knows? But I have a lot to offer yet. I'm not done yet, although I am supporting our new senior minister. That's Reverend Keith. We have the opportunity here at the Center of Enlightenment to develop a network that is far-reaching and supportive to people who have diverse ways of working, but are dedicated to serving the church with love and truth. We are not through improving and growing. I truly feel that we all have the vision, energy, skills, and dedication to move forward in our next phase of development. And that was an important thing, to go through the church, our next phase of development, which we have for some time now had the newsletter for the church, which is one of the very first spiritualist churches that ever had a newsletter. Many of them, even today, do not do a newsletter. From there, we have moved on into a website run by Lisa Argo. We have Zoom, and Richard Harrison takes care of most of that for us. We now have an outreach program. Just so many things that we have improved on and grown with. Again, we changed with the times. We had to. I was very uncomfortable with these changes because I knew nothing about them. It put me outside of my comfort zone. But as other people stepped in and took over and were able to handle these jobs, I really, really enjoyed the changes. And we hope to continue to keep growing. Okay. Remember, the board is responsible for putting in the furniture, but the vibration is a result of all those who visit and leave their love and fellowship within our walls. If we keep our service filled with love and fellowship, peace and harmony, these are the vibrations our visitors will take with them as they leave our service. The Center of Enlightenment is a place of spiritual upliftment, so you can face another week of worldly stresses. A place to find guidance. A place where you are assured of the continuity of life. A place to talk and exchange ideas with like-minded people. A place of learning through the many classes taught at the center. The heart as well as the mind is nourished here. We invite you to renew your membership today, and in the coming years, you can look forward to continued inspiration at Sunday services, the mastery of our healers and mediums, a full range of enlightening classes, unique fundraisers, and dynamic healing gatherings, an informative newsletter, and the continued support of our dedicated ministerial staff. And if you wish to tune into our website, it's coechurch.org. There is a great deal, and it's a wonderfully set up website, easy to use. So please do that for us. And we, again, thank you for being here with us and supporting us over the years and making this church a success. It has not been easy along the road. I could tell you 100 other stories, but there's no time. So I thank you for listening. Thank you.
Thank you.